The badge felt heavier than usual in her jacket pocket, even though it weighed exactly what it always had. Elena Vass had learned over 22 years that certain objects only seemed to announce themselves when someone else was about to notice them. Her mother hadn't noticed in a very long time. "You'll like this," Carol said, adjusting her scarf in the visor mirror as they waited in the security line. "Barbara's husband retires today. Full ceremony, the works. I told her we'd come support him." "I know, Mom. I'm the one who arranged the pass for you." "Right, right." Carol waved her hand, already looking past Elena toward the gate, where a young guard was checking IDs with the unhurried seriousness of someone new enough to still take the job seriously. "You're good at that kind of thing. Paperwork and such." Elena didn't correct her. She rarely did anymore. Correcting her mother had never once changed the picture Carol carried. A picture created 15 years ago, when Elena had been a junior officer behind a desk, filing reports nobody read twice. Carol had frozen that image like a photograph, convinced it still resembled the person standing in front of her. The guard leaned toward the window. "IDs, please." Carol handed hers over first, already talking. "We're here for the Reeves retirement. My daughter's escorting me. She works on base, some administrative thing. 20 years now, if you can believe it. Still at the same desk, probably." She laughed, the easy laugh of someone who believed she was being self-deprecating on her daughter's behalf, making an ordinary career sound warm and harmless. The guard reached for Elena's badge. His eyes moved across it once, then again, slower this time. Elena watched something settle behind his face. It wasn't exactly surprise. It was more like a young man suddenly recalibrating everything he'd understood during the previous 10 seconds. He straightened without seeming to make a conscious decision. "One moment, ma'am." He didn't look at Carol when he said it. He was already reaching for the phone mounted beside the booth. "This is Gate 2. I need the officer of the day. We have a flag officer requesting entry." Carol blinked. "A what?" Elena said nothing. Over the years, she'd discovered that silence often explained more than she ever could. What Carol didn't know, what she had never asked during any of the hundreds of phone calls across 2 decades, each one circling back to whether Elena had met someone, whether she'd considered buying a house, or whether the job was still working out, was that her daughter commanded a carrier strike group's logistics division from a headquarters 3 states away. She had spent 14 months in the Pacific coordinating supply lines that nobody back home ever heard about. The people working under her didn't ask whether the job was still working out. They asked what time she wanted the morning brief. It wasn't that Elena had hidden it. It simply had never come up in a way her mother was equipped to understand. Carol measured accomplishment through things she recognized: a ring, a mortgage, a title she could repeat at church without having to explain it. Rear Admiral required a vocabulary Carol had never developed because nobody had ever needed her to build one. Elena called on Sundays and talked about the weather. It was easier. A commander arrived within 4 minutes, moving with the particular briskness of someone who had been pulled away from something and was now recalculating his entire morning. He didn't shake Elena's hand so much as present himself to it. "Admiral Voss, we weren't told you'd be arriving through this gate. I can have someone escort you directly to the ceremony grounds." "That won't be necessary, Commander. I'm here as a guest today. My mother's guest, actually." She said it lightly, the way she said most things that mattered, and gestured toward Carol, who stood completely still beside the car, her scarf still slightly crooked from the mirror. The commander glanced at Carol with the reflexive courtesy owed to family, then looked back at Elena, clearly trying to determine whether he was allowed to look confused. He wasn't. He nodded once and stepped back. "Of course, ma'am. Enjoy the ceremony." The guard, still holding Elena's badge, returned it with both hands, The way people hand back something they've suddenly realized was never really theirs to hold. They didn't speak until they were walking along the gravel path toward the parade grounds, with the sound of a brass section warming up somewhere ahead. "You never said," Carol finally managed. It wasn't an accusation. It was something closer to disorientation. "You never asked what the job actually was. You asked if I liked it." "That's not—" Carol stopped herself. She looked at her daughter for a long moment, the way you look at a familiar house after discovering it has a second story you never knew existed. "I suppose I stopped picturing you as anything other than what you were at 26. Is that terrible?" "It's just what happens," Elena said. She said it without bitterness because she'd made peace with it years ago, somewhere over the Pacific, filling out reports at 2 a.m. while thinking about how her mother still believed she worked 9 to 5 behind a desk. People get a version of you and keep it. It's not always about not caring. Sometimes it's just easier to hold on to the picture you already have. Carol remained quiet for the rest of the walk. At the entrance to the ceremony grounds, a young ensign stepped forward with a folder, the formal visitor escort usually reserved for command family, and asked if she was Admiral Voss's mother. Carol looked at the folder, then at her daughter. Something in her posture changed. Not dramatically, just a slight straightening, the way people stand differently once they finally understand where they actually are. "Yes," she said. "I am." She didn't say anything else about it that day, but that evening, on the drive home, she asked Elena what her actual responsibilities were. Not the polite version, the real one. And for the first time in a long while, Carol listened without waiting for her turn to speak.